Welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about those three basic trig ratios that we talked about last time: the sine function, the cosine function, and the tangent function, or ratios. They're called functions because they're for an input there is a single output, which is the definition of function. But the sine is a ratio, and I hope you remember that what we do is when we take the sine of an angle, it's always with respect to an angle. We take the ratio of two sides of the right triangle. So the sine of angle A, this angle here, is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So remember, there's a right angle in right triangles because we're always going to do trig functions of right triangles. And across from the right angle is our hypotenuse. The side that makes the angle with the hypotenuse is called the adjacent side, and the side opposite the angle is obviously the opposite side. And so last time we had you do these ratios of finding the sine, cosine, and tangent, and we kept it very simple. Sine of this angle A would be the opposite over the hypotenuse, or it would be 3/5. Cosine would be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, or 4/5. And the tangent would be the opposite over the adjacent, or 3/4. Now, that's if we have a right triangle. Sometimes we just have an angle. And so what you'll do is you'll end up using a calculator, just like square roots. Sometimes it's easy to take the square root. If I ask you the square root of 9, you could tell me it's 3. But if I ask you the square root of 10, you don't know it, but you could use a calculator. So in today's lesson, that's what I'm going to have you do. For instance, I'm going to have you take the cosine of 79 degrees. There's no triangle to look at. There's no side lengths to reference. So what we do is we just use a calculator. Now, I want to emphasize something about using calculators and taking trig functions. There are two ways to measure angle. If we go back to this angle, we've always used degree measure. But there's another way to measure angles. It's called radians. I don't want to introduce radians. I don't really want to teach you about radians, but I want to emphasize that calculators, some of them will have radians as what their default angle measure. Others will have degrees. So for instance, if I come here to this cosine of 79 degrees and I go to my calculator, so I'm going to show you this reference, a TI-84 calculator, we have our three trig functions: sine, cosine, and tangent. And we can use those to find the cosine of 79 degrees. So I come here, and on this calculator, I'd hit the cosine key, and then I would, I need to make sure my calculator's on. I'd hit the cosine key, and then I'd type in 79 degrees, right? And I would hit enter. And I would get this ratio of a negative 0.895. Now, when you take cosine of angles, really you shouldn't have, you can have negative measures, but the problem here is I know I've done a mistake, and the reason I've done a mistake is I did not take the cosine of 79 degrees. If I come here and I hit this mode button, I will notice that, and it's kind of hard to read, but I'm in radians. I'm not in degrees. So again, my biggest thing about this lesson is emphasizing that you come over here and you change your calculator, or make sure your calculator is in degree mode. Now my calculator is in degree mode. It says degree here, that's kind of highlighted. So now I can quit out of here, and now if I take the cosine of that 79, it's going to be 79 degrees, where before it was 79 radians. And 79 radians is different than 79 degrees, just like 4 inches is different than 4 centimeters. They're different lengths, so it'd give you a different measure. So make sure your calculator is in degree measure, and I get 0.19. Now, you might have to use a calculator on your computer. So for instance, I'm going to go back to here, but I'm going to use this calculator. Again, here, this calculator, I have my sine, my cosine, and my tangent. But rather than hitting it first, if you notice on my calculator here, I hit the cosine button first, and then I typed in 79 and then hit equals or enter, and I get my measure. But on this calculator, I actually type in 79, and then I hit the cosine button, and it gives me the 0.19. Now down here is my radians. A lot of calculators will have a little radians. It'll have an R if it's in radian modes. Sometimes it will have a D displayed somewhere if it's in degrees. See right here, now I want to go to degrees. Now I'm in degree modes. And so my answer would be 0.19. And if you'll notice, this says to round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So I just type in 0.19 and I hit enter and I get it right. And that's all you're doing in this whole lesson is using a calculator to find your ratio or your answer or your decimal representation of this ratio. So again, I could use this calculator here. It's asking me to find the tangent of 62. So again, on the calculator on my computer, I type in the 62 first. I already know I'm in degree measure, and I hit the tangent, and it gives me 1.88. So I type in 1.88, and I hit enter, and because I was rounding to the nearest hundredth, and I get it right. If I'm using a calculator, your own calculator, just make sure you know if the calculator is in degree mode. I've already put this in degree mode, and I'm going to take the tangent of 53. So in this one, I hit the tangent button, hit 53, hit enter, and I get 1.3. Now I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth, so it's going to be 1.33. So now I come back to here and I type in 1.33 and I hit enter and I get my answer. So, and the hardest ones you'll probably get is where it's asking you for all three, sine, cosine, and tangent. But again, you just grab your calculator, whichever one you find the easiest to use. Again, make sure you're in degree mode. And I'm going to type in 38 and hit the sine, and I get 0.62 because I'm rounding because that's a 5. That's going to become a 2. So I type in 0.62. Then I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to go back to my calculator, and I'm going to type in 38, and now I'm going to type in the cosine, or hit the cosine. That's 0.79 because I'm rounding. This is 8 larger than 5, so 0.79. So 0.79, and I'm going to do the tangent. So I type in 38 degrees and hit the tangent key, and I get 0.78. So I come over here and I get 0.78, and I hit submit and I get them right. Hopefully this will be a very quick and easy lesson for you, a nice easy lesson after spring break. If you do have questions, please do contact me and I will help you in any way that I can.